Good morning, Dublin. A quick point of housekeeping before we start on the rising stars of open source for 2023. The insights in these presentations on the growth stage actually decay very quickly, so most of the insights is in the front seats. So if anyone in the kind of back area wants to move down to the front and benefit from the higher level of insight, you're very welcome to do that, and I strongly encourage it. We at Ox have been running this piece of analysis for the last 3 years, the rising stars of open source, where we do some data analysis across all of the public Git activity and highlight some businesses that we think are ready to break out in terms of their contributor activity. A quick caveat up front, only one of the businesses in the 2021 cohort and none of the other businesses in this analysis are Ox portfolio companies. This is not a self-serving VC cheerleading hype fest. This is a serious piece of analysis where we've tried to identify some of the leading indicators of scale in open source. A quick note on me. I have done a range of different things. I am a partner with Ox. I've been investing with Ox for the last 5 years. Excellent move coming down to the front, highly commended. Quick round of applause for this man. Well done. I'm an investor with Ox, have been for the last 5 years, investing in B2B software companies in Europe. We work with businesses that scale internationally, and so we're very focused on the leading indicators of potentially massive companies. We focus on go-to-market fit as the kind of North Star for that massive scale potential. I've also worked in a SaaS company. I've been a CFO within finance teams. I have also worked as an investment banker, advising SaaS businesses on M&A and capital raising. And for my sins, I've also gone back to school and am at the moment finishing my computer science degree. And so I have used many of these open source tools in various different things that I've been building for my personal use. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to start by covering the analysis that we've done and how we approach open source. We need to think about open source companies quite differently to normal SaaS businesses in terms of the leading indicators of scale. We're going to take you through the previous cohorts, where are they now, and then we're going to look at some of the trends in 2023's cohort. We will then finish by revealing the rising stars of open source for 2023. Why does anyone care about this? Well, from an investor's perspective, open source businesses have the potential to become massive global superstars of success. But they scale very differently to normal SaaS businesses. A lot of the metrics that we as investors look for as leading indicators of scale, so, ARR growth, LTV to CAC ratios, things like that, are just not applicable for early stage open source businesses. And so we need to look at them differently. We need to look at communities and patterns of engagement. There are plenty of metrics that will tell you about people's awareness of an open source project. But actually, to understand true engagement, to understand the community that's building software and using software at an early stage in open source, you need to go a level deeper, and that is what we've tried to do. In terms of those awareness metrics, everyone's very familiar, I'm sure, with some of the kind of obvious metrics that GitHub will spit out in relation to projects: stars, forks, watches. But as I say, these metrics only really tell you about how many people are following a project or who are interested in using a branch of a project for their own side projects. They don't really tell you about the critical mass forming behind a community leading a project to scale. So what we did is kind of homebrew a metric that we think is a better indicator of a community. We measure active contributors in a period, in the same way that if you were looking at a consumer business, you might look at monthly active purchasers of a product, or in a SaaS business, monthly active users of a product. We look at periodic active contributors to a product. And we define a contributor as someone who engages with that repo in various different ways. That analysis is not straightforward to do. GitHub puts all of its event data online, and it's very queryable through BigQuery, but it's a lot of data. There are more than 28 million public repos going back in time for more than a decade. We analyze information for more than 100,000 projects at the event level on a monthly basis, and then we enrich that data with information from the GitHub API, which has relatively low rate limits, and so it takes quite a long time to do this analysis. And once we've done the analysis, we thought, OK, let's go back and back test this over historically successful GitHub projects. So we looked at more than 175,000 open source projects, some of which had been very successful, some of which had been less commercially successful, and tried to identify the level of active contribution that really showed breakout potential. Now, some of you who are familiar with venture capital will know that we are obsessed with the construction product noun fit. So you'll be familiar with product market fit, product founder fit. I have great product pasta fit. What we identified is a zone where projects hit what we call product community fit, i.e. a level of critical mass in the contributor base that would allow those companies, A, to raise capital, and then to deploy that capital into the community and scale really, really fast. We found that somewhere between 50 and 200 was the area where most projects hit that level of critical mass. And so we call that the product community fit zone. So having identified this zone that worked quite well when back-tested across historic GitHub data, the question was, could we identify some future rising stars? Could we potentially, as investors, make some money from this analysis? And so in 2021, we released a piece of analysis where we identified 20 or so projects that we thought were breaking through that product community fit zone and had the potential to scale really dramatically. And they did. So our 2021 cohort, after we'd done that analysis and identified them, has gone on to raise more than $1 billion of venture capital. And there are some really exciting businesses in this cohort. So if you're familiar with businesses like Airbyte, Temporal, Teleport, Gravity is a portfolio company of ours, very proud to have invested in that, and some really, really successful open source projects that commercialized very quickly after breaking through that product community fit zone. In total, as I said, more than $1 billion raised, and 86% of the companies have raised more than $5 million. So there is a kind of minimum viable level of commercial fit that these businesses have achieved, which was an interesting finding. And so we thought, OK, maybe we're onto something here. Let's do it again. And so in 2022, we ran the same analysis. We launched it here at SaaStock. We announced the cohort in this room last year. And that cohort has gone on to raise more than $500 million in the last year, despite relatively difficult capital markets environment as a backdrop. It was actually slightly difficult to produce these slides because they kept raising capital and announcing it in the last 2 weeks when we were trying to put the information together. So DuckDB announcing another $50 million raise just a couple of weeks ago. From that cohort, a fantastic business that has achieved already unicorn status in Red Panda, and also some really great database businesses. MindsDB and DuckDB will be familiar to European investors as breakout database businesses. And so, yeah, in terms of the analysis so far, 4 to 5 minted unicorns from 2 cohorts released to date, 7 or so potential soonicorns, growth equity funded businesses that are scaling internationally, employing hundreds of people globally now after starting to commercialize, more than $1.5 billion of venture capital raised, and only 1 exit so far, which is a little bit surprising and something that I think we might see start to change in the next couple of years. So, before we reveal the 2023 rising stars, just a note on some of the product trends that we've seen in the 2023 cohort, and particularly the rise of AI influencers, individuals who are working on AI projects, which, because of the bleeding edge nature of the technology, achieve massive scale very quickly. People who are building with AI in this room will, I'm sure, be aware of Harrison Chase and LangChain. It's become the global standard, the de facto tool for vectorizing, chunking, and running agents over various different sorts of data. But what was really interesting is the growth in Harrison's kind of GitHub engagement as he became that de facto influencer for LangChain and then the CEO of LangChain once it raised money and commercialized. The growth was unlike anything we'd ever seen in terms of engagement in all of the analysis we've done historically. You can see here the level of engagement for steady state scaled open source businesses like Redis, Stripe, Auth0, and Harrison goes from kind of 0 to gigantic in comparison to these businesses in kind of, call it, 2 or 3 months. We also wanted to highlight Georgia Gerganov, who took the Whisper technology from OpenAI and also took Llama from Meta and converted those into C++ accessible projects and allowed people to deconstruct them and work with them in a more intuitive way. Again, his engagement massively outstripped those 3 scale companies during the period, and actually his engagement was approaching the level of the OpenAI repos themselves, which is pretty impressive. So, without further ado, the 2023 Rising Stars. All the investors in the room are thinking, kind of, okay, how do I make some money? Well, this is the set. And some really exciting software businesses here that we think are set to transform the industry. A couple of trends that are worth highlighting in 2023 that are specific to this set and slightly different from what we've seen before. Firstly, huge focus on performance and a new generation of infrastructure technologies that is ready to leapfrog the previous generation of incumbents. So, for example, Dragonfly DB, Israel and US-based Redis replacement, massively more performant than Redis, built to switch out Redis and essentially enable teams that were previously using those technologies to run much more data-intensive applications. Surreal DB, a London-based multi-model database, which is doing some really interesting things in kind of making it very intuitive, giving a really great developer experience to people who are working with multi-model databases. Shuttle is one worth highlighting, back-end with relatively no code, built with Rust, incredibly performant. Developers really focused on using the next generation of technologies to build highly performant infrastructure and outcompete some of the big incumbents. And then I think the other obvious trend to highlight, which people will be expecting, is the rise of AI, the importance of AI. Not in the sense that people are building LLMs. There are highly paid teams of hundreds of people in Silicon Valley building LLMs for you. You don't need to do that. But building the next level of tooling to allow people to build AI-enabled applications in their businesses. A couple of good examples would be Quadrant, still flying relatively under the radar of this industry globally, but a Berlin-based vector database competitor to Pinecone. 3 times as performant as Pinecone, built in Rust. If you're building anything that uses vector databases, go and try Quadrant. It's great. If you tell Andre, the CEO, that I sent you, I might get some cloud credits as well, which would be awesome. Ivy is another really interesting business based out of the UK, building a unifying layer. It was previously called Unify AI, but it's now called Ivy. Building a unifying layer to allow different parts of the AI stack to integrate very, very quickly with relatively few lines of code. Enables you to build massive, complex AI applications. I think it's also probably worth covering the layer above that in the AI stack, so businesses like Flowise. Super interesting business. The next level of automation, think of it as the next step kind of beyond RPA, where people are using AI agents instead of RPA scripts to automate workflows in the applications they're building and also in terms of their internal operations. And personally, just a huge shout out to Cursor, which is an AI GitHub Copilot IDE, which is super helpful if you're ever building anything. I'm not good at building technology, and having someone in the IDE telling me how to build it better is just amazing. So yeah, the rising stars of open source 2023. Fortunately for you, you don't have to take pictures of this slide if you're interested in knowing who these companies are, because we've provided a QR code, which now you do have to take pictures of. This will link to a report which has gone live this morning. We are very excited to highlight these companies. We think that they show the bright future of open source globally. And we at Ox are very proud to highlight them and proud to invest in rapidly scaling businesses. If you are interested in open source and you see me wandering around, come and grab me. I'm polite and would love to talk about open source with you. And yeah, I hope you have a great SaaStock and look forward to seeing you around. Thank you.